as somebody who has had the misfortune to follow debates in the UN Human Rights Council, you will find that the issue of Israel constantly comes up as cited as the leading example of double standards in Western human rights policy. So if you solve the problem of double standards on Israel, then other regimes cannot use that as a line of defence. So there is actually empirical support for what Ilan is saying in a principled way. This is actually a key fault line in global debates on human rights. Just to clarify the point that I made about the ANC's success wasn't primarily because it targeted Britain. I just gave that as an example of how you can target forces outside of the target state in order to have an indirect impact. And I think targeting the United States and changing that policy debate there could have a very important impact, because Israel is able to get away with a lot of the horrific things that it does because of external backing. So I'm not saying that sanctions, BDS, etc. cannot be part of some coherent strategy. I'm just saying I look forward to hearing it. And I think, again, changing the conversation, changing the discourse, opening up political space, forcing Israel onto the defensive, again, that can be part of a counter-hegemonic strategy, because part of that is about attacking its taken for granted legitimacy and the idea that you must not ever criticise Israel in the United States, otherwise you're some kind of disloyal Jew, for example. That does need to be challenged in the US, and opening up different options for US foreign policy could be a start, which then undermines the prop of a government, an external prop, which then forces the government into changes. So that's the kind of dynamic that I'm talking about. But I think we have to think through those dynamics more clearly than I've seen done so far. So I'm not saying it can't work, I'm just saying we need to see, and then we can judge, is it working? So if the goal is, for example, to change the discourse in Israel, is that working? If the goal is to force the emergence or allow for the emergence of a new left force or some kind of new moderate force that will allow for change within the Israeli polity, is that working? We should be able to actually measure that empirically and then find out whether this is a strategy that is worth supporting.
The question about that Israelis didn't mention BDS when they were complaining about the delays on the settler railway that Viola was going to build into the occupied territories. So, my analysis of that is that it's very often the case that when institutions change their policies, they don't declare publicly that it was the result of activist pressure. And we have quite a lot of that in institutions that I've worked for. I don't think it betrays a failure of people who support BDS to talk and to debate and to write letters and to do things. I mean, just to give you a sense of what this means, instead of going to Tel Aviv University to give a paper about Syrian workers, that would be how I would advance my career. And that would be how I, as a career academic, would make progress. But instead of that, I say I won't do that because that's business as usual. But instead, I do interact with Tel Aviv University, but in a way that tries to challenge their complicity with militarized forms of occupation, and the silencing of academic freedom on campus. So, I mean, there is an interaction, there is an engagement, and there are some specific examples where it has worked with regard to programs that didn't get moved to the Hebrew University, but again, it wasn't publicized. And I think, but the main point about Veolia is that it's a commercial logic. Some people who don't care a hoot about Israelis or Palestinians will make commercial decisions. It's a bit awkward now to support the infrastructure of the occupation. We will run into issues of corporate social responsibility. We might get some, rather nasty, sort of grungy-looking campaigners showing up on our doorstep with pictures of murdered Palestinian babies. And perhaps we don't want to really go down that road. So even if Israelis aren't talking about it, the idea, the strategy that I allude to with Veolia is that you get people making, once the campaign reaches a certain critical mass, commercial decisions start to be taken, which then have a sort of an impact.